I left a multiple six-figure job. And so there was a point in my life where success was purely just money. And, you know, money really helps.
Today, we have Courtney McLaughlin. Professionally, Courtney considers herself a problem solver. After serving Fortune 100 clients and founders for over 11 years as a VP of Strategy and Technology, she has recently left the corporate world and is building out a private book consulting with individuals and executives who have big ideas. Think of her as your right-hand woman who gets shit done. Thank you, Courtney, so much for being on the show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. Another Courtney.
Of course. So today we are going to be delving in deep to risk-taking and aligning ourselves with the life that we are meant to, and also learning signs throughout life's journey that we can listen to really live our most truest life form and life path, which I'm really looking forward to talking to you about.
Awesome. Wonderful.
Yeah. So before we start, I would just love if you could share what your journey has looked like for the listeners and what has brought you to where you are today.
Yeah, great question. I was not sure kind of where I wanted to kind of take my career path. One of those, what do you want to be when you grow up questions, I feel like I still can't really answer. It's that I want to do everything, that I want to learn everything possible. I originally then kind of found myself in graphic design. I went to school for design, and coming out of that, I'm like, oh, I really want to be a package designer, identity, connecting kind of products and things with the end users or people. But straight out of design school, my one of the co-founders of the company I ended up working for was at that show, and he's like, "Hey, would you like to be a project manager in tech?" And I'm like, "No, sir, this is a design show. I want to be a designer." And he's like, "No, how would you like to be a project manager in tech?" And I'm like, "You know what? Let's give it a go." And so I joined this wee 30-person startup, and over 11 years kind of grew with them and grew that to be this 600 plus international kind of digital consulting firm. And I brought a lot of like process and organization and optimization and a lot of this organizer energy along the way, and kind of eventually found myself like in a wonderful place, becoming, some of the top leadership. But thinking back on that reflectively now, I didn't necessarily choose that. None of that path, none of that where I found myself was that I want to get this thing and I go and do it. And I just kind of stumbled across the next problem to solve, like the next promotion, the next, client, the next whatever the work was. And then kind of got to this point, probably the past couple of years, thinking about, okay, well, if I could shape this into something I wanted to do more, it would be more like this, or it'd be more like that. And through a few conversations kind of internally, it sounded like that wasn't necessarily aligned with the business and with the corporation. And a little bit sad to say, but probably was there for my time to go. I think there's a lot of compliments in there where I could have continued to show up Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, and done exactly what was asked of me. But I'm just not really that person. I want to learn new stuff. I want to do new stuff and achieve new goals or objectives. And that kind of has then led me to this more freelance or consultative place. And that's actually where I stumbled across some of your work as well. Then just through women who freelance and connecting with other folks looking to just kind of do stuff and try things for themselves and put themselves out there.
Of course, of course. Now, you're an advocate for giving things a proper go to truly understand their fit in life. Can you elaborate on your personal experience where stepping out of your comfort zone, from what you've shared, you've done a lot of that throughout your journey, has led to unexpected growth and clarity?
Mm-hmm. I think some of that, well, there's little bits throughout, I think, what I've been talking about. But some of that stems from just things you haven't done before and just trying it. And that could be from just reaching out to strangers on the internet, like yourself, and just hey, I'd love to chat. It could also be connections through LinkedIn. And it's not necessarily me advocating for the cold, hi, will you hire me kind of connection, but just, folks that are maybe working in certain fields or working with certain titles that you really like. There's a woman that is a fractional COO that I'd reached out to about a week ago and just said, hey, it's really exciting that you're in this, fractional is a new cool word, buzzy. What does that look like for you? I'd love to chat. And, you don't really expect a response back, but she immediately responded and she's like, yes, I'd love to chat. So, just setting up time and calls with her. And so that's kind of like that outward giving something a go that's like weird and nervous and messaging the internet. But thinking about it internally, even just things that are worth trying. So maybe I started seeing a therapist a couple years ago, and she is just the most hilarious, wonderful woman. Shout out to Wendy. She's like this like gray haired, like she's probably gonna hate me if she ever hears this, but she's just this like badass, like she like works out and lifts weights and just tells you like get the fuck do like go do what you say you're gonna do. She's so funny. But even just like taking that risk of like, okay, like I want to work on how I process and handle XYZ information or how I communicate. And I did all of this like pre-work, almost like pre-therapy on myself before I like went and connected with Wendy. And she's taught me so much about like your brain and the actual science and rewiring your neurons. And a lot of that is through this gratitude and meditation or manifestation or just thinking more positively about your life. Then you feel more positively about your life. And now your life is just better genuinely. And it sounds a little woo-woo, but like maybe I'm only one woo. But there's like so much science behind it. And it's some of these like, unless you got to get over yourself of like, oh, I'm in therapy. Like it's not this big scary thing. It's a lot of just like learning how to feel awesome about everything that you're tackling, everything you're doing, even if you're failing along the path to air quotes, get there.
Yeah, of course. And it sounds to me that, you know, throughout this journey you've had, it's been a lot of self-reflection, a lot of fear fighting and getting out of your comfort zone and just embracing a more positive perspective on things, on how where you are now has brought you much more fulfillment and success throughout your journey. What does that resonate with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Part of it is like just being get comfortable being uncomfortable. Like if you're sitting in this one place and doing snaps, if you're doing the same thing, then you're going to be expecting the same results. And I think that's also like some definition of insanity is like repeating the same actions and expecting different outcomes. Like unless, I don't know, there are certain people out there that like super routine, super consistent. They want the exact same thing. Maybe that works for them. I'm so happy for that person, but that's not me. And that doesn't mean that I'm unhappy once I achieve something. It's not I've done it and I'm throwing it away. It's like a notch in your belt. It's, you get to carry that achievement with you and you get to move on to do the next thing. A lot of the thinking about it in a positivity comment you were mentioning there, it's, you know, whether you think positively or negatively, like either way you're right because you're thinking it. And so if you sit in this like negative spiraling or like, oh, the coffee's cold, it's like, but I get to have a cup of coffee. Like if you just find the positive and the gratitude, it's the like the breakups or that I have to move or like there's a lot of sadness. It's not that everything good is always happening in life because of course there's bad things that happen. There's of course moments where I feel really emotional and sad or whatever it is. But it's just like allowing yourself to feel that and then work through, well, what would make you feel better? Or why is tomorrow going to be different? Or how can this situation, while still sad, have an element of gratitude and positivity in it? And there's certain folks when you're chatting with them where you can't, like you'll notice it more, I think, as you align with being more grateful and being more positive, that you'll just be in a day-to-day conversation with anybody. Maybe it's someone you know, maybe it's someone you don't. And you start to realize how negative other people's thinking can be. And it's like they're complaining always. It's like, oh, and then the car broke down and then I have to go to work tomorrow. And it's just like you all of a sudden are sucked into this wallow and you're like, anyway, so the sun's shining today. How are we feeling? Like, let's bring it back up a notch because there's actually just so much exciting opportunity or, I don't know, just exciting life to live that if you're only wallowing, like, I don't know, that just sounds like a horrendous place to even just sit in, never mind like engage with and talk to.
Of course. And I think for the listeners too, if you're in a space where, you know, you've been wallowing a lot or you feel like this is so far-fetched for where your current reality is, I don't know about you, Courtney, but I think you won't realize how your life can change until you start these little daily habits of trying your best to have a more like a shifting your perspective on what your life is currently looking like. And then when you come out of it, you're like, oh, like for me, when I surrounded myself with the people that also, you know, not happy with their life and not happy with their day to day, you start motivating other people to shift their perspective as well. So yes, you can stay like the people you surround yourself with, or you can make those shifts to build a community where you wake up and you're the friend that you used to complain with every day together. You now are practicing gratitude for one another and the fact that you are just alive today.
Oh, absolutely. Like, it's definitely not an overnight thing. I wouldn't say I've always been this optimistic and positive. Not to say that I was in a polar extreme, but I think I've seen so much growth in myself the past 2-ish years, I want to say. And that is just like, it just takes time. You have to want to put in the effort, though, in order for you to see the effort. Like, you have to genuinely want to show up for it. It's like trying to convince your friend to stop smoking. Like, unless they want to, like, the success rate of that happening significantly decreases. So like, you have to be ready to show up and do it. And it could start with daily things, right? Like finding just like every morning, right, what am I grateful for? And it could be the same thing every day. I remember when I first started, I'm like, I don't know, like I'm grateful for coffee. I'm grateful that it's sunny outside, like genuinely like little silly things. But then I don't know, like certain people started like surfacing in that. Like I'm grateful for like literally yourself and allowing me to be on this show and having this opportunity. And then it starts to expand, and then it's like, oh, well, my whole day is going to be an amazing day because I get to talk to you at the beginning of it. And it's this like, just like thinking about it, like, and now I'm having a great day. And sure, something could happen later, but it's just like on a whole, you know, it just takes time. It's also one of those, it's so much easier to reflect and look back of where you were maybe 6 months ago, 9 months ago, a year ago, and putting these like little things in place so that, you know, you start to just want to show up more optimistically. It really helps. And I totally resonate with your point around like motivating others around you. I've always been a little bit of like the guidance giver, the advice kind of pools out whether people ask for it or not. But I feel like more recently it's really been like, hey, Courtney, can we like pro con this? Cause I'm like really stuck in all the cons. Or it doesn't always have to be like light at the end of the tunnel type of exciting. Like we can just like think about something not only in the negative and allowing yourself to at least see both sides before you like continue with your thinking or continue with your decision making in one path or another.
Of course. And going back to where you had touched on, you know, embracing not being comfortable, not just seeking that being comfort all the time and getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. I believe that we live in a time where being comfortable is just too accessible. You know, the access that we have to devices and electronics and just everything around us. You could literally order food and have it at your door in no time. And, you know, instead of learning new recipes, like that can be something so simple that for someone who has difficulties with being uncomfortable can start that journey with. Anywho, a large majority, I think, are reluctant to embracing being uncomfortable, which significantly impedes living a life of fulfillment and being aligned, because we have to figure out what we want in our path of life, right? And that involves being uncomfortable. What advice would you give to someone who is hesitant to leave their comfort zone due to the fear of unknown or fearing failure, or even fearing success and not knowing what that would look like?
That's an interesting point, fearing success. From like the fearing failure side of things, like you can't grow unless you're like trying and stumbling. And it doesn't have to be this massive leap. It can be little baby steps and little milestones, like giving yourself the grace that, yes, you want to go from like, I don't know, leaving your corporate job to this big successful like entrepreneurial life, but what are all of the baby milestones that you can build yourself along the way so that it's less of this leaping into like the blind darkness. Yeah, in terms of like thinking about failures, it doesn't have to be as big of a leap from, you know, where you're at to where your ultimate dream is. It's thinking about building this work back or like project manager timeline, these mini milestones along the way that you can check in with yourself or you know, give yourself grace that you are making progress. And that literally can be the grace of, I reached out to someone today. Sure, they didn't answer me, but I did that. I took that first step. It's the, I opened a Word doc and I downloaded a free template to make a resume. I still have to put the words in it, but like I have the template to make a resume. And like all of these are little steps towards, I don't know, maybe you're changing careers in this example. But just giving yourself that I'm doing something along that path. The interesting half of your question around like fear of success, I don't have the answer to, because I think almost I have that. I have this like, I don't know, what if the grass actually is greener? Like what would success even look like? And that's tricky. I think like success to everybody looks and feels a little bit different depending on your background and what you've achieved. I left a multiple six-figure job. And so there was a point in my life where success was purely just money. And, you know, money really helps. I don't want to say money doesn't buy happiness, but it sure buys a lot of things. And so it's, you know, what are other ways that you can track towards success that are not just, or once you've set yourself in maybe financial freedom as maybe an initial bucket, some of that success can then change and that definition can change. And maybe that's how much time, right? Time is the ultimate, you know, asset or gift that we all have and we don't get back. So it's, how can I be trading my time for dollars or my time with loved ones or my time with myself differently?
I can resonate with that too, where some people, I don't think it's talked about often, and that's why I ask, is that there are many people that fear being successful and what that comes with, right? And I think that's a very subconscious thing that many people do not actually recognize, is we hold back a lot of parts of ourselves, a lot of our abilities, in my opinion, because we don't know what our full potential is. And until we embrace those times where we're uncomfortable and we don't even know if we can actually do it, those are the times where we learn, oh, we can do it. We can be successful. We can show up, right? How do you differentiate between the discomfort of, you know, just embracing these different aspects of yourself and your journey and genuine misalignment with a path or endeavor?
Yes, it's true, right? Because you're thinking about like, am I just bored in my day to day? Have I achieved all I can do? Sometimes I think I've heard about like boredom being a little bit of a sign that something needs to shift. And so you just need to, you know, start by evaluating what it is that you're feeling. How often are you feeling it? Taking note of what's happening around you, external factors, internal factors. And so that's thinking about your life in major pillars. That could be career. Are you satisfied in your career? Is there a next step in your career? Are you still interested in climbing the corporate ladder or climbing a success ladder, let's say, versus, and I don't want to make it sound like, you know, stepping back into like a coasting part of your career, but maybe you're not as ambitious and you're not looking to put in all of the hours to do the things, maybe you have a family, something like that. There's thinking about your love life, like thinking about, are you with a partner? Are you seeking partnership? What does that relationship, you know, pillar look like, and how does it make you feel personally? What are you doing day to day for yourself? What does your wellness and health activities look like? And that's not just physical, but, you know, on and on. There's probably like 5 or 6-ish pillars if you want to break that down. I like to always think about like learning and, you know, school, depending on your age, but just learning more broadly, and whether you're getting that type of, I mean, I love learning new things all the time. Am I getting any of that in these other pillars? Just kind of evaluating, where could I be making changes? It gets tricky then when you're like, oh, I want to change them all. And then I think you need to kind of give yourself a little weighting system of like, which one is going to, you know, if you do find areas across several different themes that you want to change in your life, like, you don't have to do them all at once. I think I took like the bull by the horns and did several all at the same time, but you can do one at a time. It's probably healthier. And kind of like weight them, like which one do I want to tackle first? And that could be like, you know, my rent is really high. I'm not necessarily loving the building and it's really stressful, like having to come up with like, because the rent increase, coming up with that extra cash. So why don't I focus on where I'm living first and like kind of change that up? Or maybe it's like, you know, the job hunt market. Now that's a very long process that you're going to want to sink your time and energy into. And thinking about time and energy as two really valuable pieces, like you need to be able to focus fully on, you know, job market hunting or, I don't know, taking a course that you want to work on. But I think it's identifying a couple of these pillars and trying to really assess, where am I at right now? Where would I want to be eventually? If that's that big leap, what are the milestones between there so that they're a little bit more achievable? Those like small measurable goals to get you a little bit closer to where you want to go.
And understanding that it's not going to happen overnight, right? And
absolutely
knowing that every day, if you just show up a little bit more and a little bit more, that's when the big changes will come, right? I always say the small changes make the biggest outcomes.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was thinking a little bit more about this idea of boredom too. And sometimes maybe that tells you that you've achieved something and and you've got that thing and you haven't yet set yourself the next objective. Like I'm very A-type, like set a goal, go do a thing. And once you achieve that thing, and maybe this is kind of ingrained in us from school, like you pass the grade, you move on to the next class, you move on to the next course, and there's something else to do once you've finished something. I kind of build my life that way. And that could even be from like, I've never run before. And then I picked up running in October and decided I was going to run a half marathon because that's the next thing you do logically. But these types of like, you just set yourself objectives of things to work on. And if you're sitting in this like comfortable and happy, or comfortable and something isn't feeling right. And that's a really tough one to talk to people about and ask, how do you feel? And sometimes you need to be asked that question several times, or sit with it to think about it. Like, am I like good and I'm just living life and this is like a season of rest or comfort for me or for this person? Or is it really telling me like, okay, I've done this, I feel good, it's time for me to make some changes and level up and set new goals. And I think a big piece for me was kind of as I hit 30, 31, I was like chalking up like what have I done in my life? And then, I've somehow checked all the boxes, the mental boxes of like, wow, I have done everything that I thought was possible for me in my entire lifetime, all by the time I was 30. And it was a little bit of this like, oh geez, well now what? What's next? And some people would say, well, then you've made it. Like now you can just like coast and hang out. But if you're not that person, that's like, it's like thinking about when you retire. It's like, are you going to sit on your couch now and not go to work every day and do nothing? No, you're going to like do what you love, or you're going to find like a part-time hobby or volunteer or something to do if you're that type of go-getter and that type of personality. So, achieving goals and sitting in this place of now, okay, I'm done. Am I comfortable to like continue just doing the same status quo, the same normal ongoing? Or is this the time now for me to reflect and build this next, plan, or set in motion what I want my life to be going forward, and start to create those goals? That's been the tricky part for me though, is figuring out like, what are my next big like life dreams and life goals? And so they're a little bit unfolding as we continue, but I feel like that's been the joy at this point, is that I can kind of ride the wave of as they unfold and what I want them to be.
And building off this, what factors do you consider when deciding whether to commit fully to something new, especially when it involves leaving behind what is familiar and comfortable for you?
I'm a bit of an all-in kind of person. So I do spend a lot of time analyzing. So I'm very analytical, those pro-con lists, that type of like, especially if you're making a big decision, like leaving your partner or like leaving your, employer that you've been with for 11 years. And so it's really, a little bit, I think that the second that you start to have that thought, I feel like that's probably an indication in itself. But for sake of argument, doing the analysis of, does this make me happy? Can I continue to grow here? And it has to align with your values, right? A very strong, important value for me is continued growth in relationships, in jobs, in career, like in whatever it is. And so if I can't get that with where I'm at, then that's a pretty good indicator that this isn't for me anymore. So I really do analyze. I try and evaluate and be like specific, like, am I just lonely? Am I just bored? Can I ask for more in the situation that I'm in? Maybe it's my employer. Like, can I ask them for the promotion? Can I ask them for more responsibilities without a promotion? Can I ask to move to a different department? And if you've explored avenues within where you're at in order to give yourself what you need, it's kind of coming down to the fact that maybe it's just not it. And then the hardest part is pulling the trigger. And that's just jumping. That's just like knowing that you're going to be okay because you already have been. Like, think about where you were at. Think about what it took to get here. Like, there were definitely struggles. There was definitely hurdles to overcome, but you made it. Like, you're going to make it. You can do hard things. You've done hard things to get here, and you're going to be able to continue to do hard things moving forward. And it's just remembering that and jumping. Or having someone like us to call, and then like you give them a little shove.
Awesome. No, and I really like that perspective on it. Includes like just adapting to new things. When it comes to adapting to change and committing to new things, it can be really challenging, and probably the biggest adjustment when making the effort to grow and align yourself with the things that you want. How do you stay adaptable and open-minded when exploring new opportunities, especially when they challenge your existing beliefs or your existing routines even?
Yeah, part of it is staying open-minded that you're trying something new. So you're going to have to give yourself a bit of grace with figuring out that newness.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's like setting expectations, but like with yourself. So especially, I think when you start in a new company, as an example, I think they say somewhere between the 3 to 6 months is you could be having a horrendous time, and that's just because you don't know what to do or who to talk to or who to ask or what the expectations on communication are, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so going into that, like, yes, it's so exciting. It's fresh opportunities with lots of learning, and it's what you signed up for. You are going to do this big shift and this big change, and it's going to be hard because you're ready for that. You can handle that. And so it's understanding with yourself,
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, I'm going to like give myself X amount of time, and then literally mark your calendar on what that is, that 6 month mark, and reflect back at how much you've gone through and how much you've like hopefully feel better by that time. And if not, though, if you are really still hating it, like you have given it a proper go. You have set yourself a milestone, something far enough out where like, you've been through the trenches a little bit. And if by that time it still isn't feeling any better and you have properly given it the attention, you've given it a chance to fix something or to, I don't know, dig in deeper, then that's a good marker of like, okay, maybe this isn't for me. And I think it's
Mm-hmm.
really just giving yourself these like blocks and milestones. And maybe that's also, back to the previous question, thinking about like, how do you know when to let go or not? Like setting yourself markers forwards as well into the future. Like I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
spend 3 months dedicated to working on my mental health or job hunting or asking my employer to figure out a plan to get us to the next step. And
Mm-hmm.
then get to your milestone marker and think like, have I done it?
And a big part of that too, for me, I think, I don't know if this resonates with you, but I, for a long time, was someone, if it's hard for me, if it's challenging, it's not meant for me. Like, if I wasn't good at it from the get-go, trying something new, wanting to do something next. And I don't know if that was like the competitive part of me for a long time. I think it was definitely ego driven because there were some things that I really excelled in and I knew that I excelled in those things, but I was also missing all of these learning opportunities along this journey because I would start something, even going back as far as when I was a child, like doing sports. If the
Yeah.
first few times I tried it, I wasn't good at it, I was done. I was moving on to the next thing. But along that journey, and now that I'm in my adulthood, I'm realizing that I do love learning and not looking at it as this is challenging for me, but looking at it as this is a new opportunity for me to learn and build on my skills, teach myself how to be consistent with things even when it's difficult for me. How does that resonate with you if it does?
Oh, absolutely. Like, especially the competitiveness in it. Like, I've got to win. I've got to be the best at the sport, at the game, at the like team building activity. Like, anybody
Yeah.
on my team, like, I'm here to crush you now. Like, and no, absolutely. And so that, like, that's a really great point, right? It's like, how are you able to let yourself like lean into something if you're nervous you're not going to be good at it, or you're not going to be good at it because you haven't done it before.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess part of that maybe stems from like, why are you afraid of failing, or are you afraid of failing in front of strangers, in front of new people? For myself, I found it recently very reflective talking to another friend about this nervousness to put myself out there as an independent business professional in front of my friends and family, as if I'm not good enough to say that this is what I'm capable of doing and the
Mm-hmm.
services that I'm capable of offering in this market, versus like if I had this faceless, nameless Instagram or social following, like I will blast who I am and what I do to the internet. And why am I nervous about this? So, thinking about like where you can, drop your ego or let yourself feel worthy and valid, and ask
Mm-hmm.
yourself those questions to try and dig in there. See if you can kind of lower the bar. It's not you competitive against someone else. It's here's what I can bring to the world. Here's what I can bring to you in a positive light, not like you need me and this like weird salesy feeling on the inside.
Yeah. And for the listeners too, I now do things that I'm terrible at just for the enjoyment of doing it and embracing that aspect of me. Like, for example, snowboarding. I absolutely suck at snowboarding. I'm working on it, but now in the winter, I will tumble all the way down hills and injure myself because I find it fun to laugh at myself and try things that I know I'm not going to be good at, but if I keep it up, possibly I could be. I think with snowboarding, I don't think it'll ever be. It's some kind of coordination thing that that's not working for me. But I now find a lot of enjoyment. And for the listeners, I would encourage them to start doing something that you know you absolutely suck at. Like just start getting in. If it's getting out of your comfort zone and you want to do something that's familiar, well, think about something that you don't really particularly enjoy doing or that you don't think you're good at, and just start having fun with it. That's where I would start personally.
Totally. It doesn't have to be this like quit your job and go do something else. It can definitely be a little bit more in control. Maybe I can like echo with an example I think about in my own life is like bread baking, which like everybody did in the pandemic, the hot thing, you couldn't find yeast. But actually post-pandemic is when I took up bread baking, and I like love being creative. I love like making and art and like creation with my hands. And so bread baking felt very natural. Like, okay, like you're going to spend like 3 days and then, there's 8-hour rest windows in between. It takes forever to create this thing. And then it's just like this mush of like a unperfect, I'm imagining this beautiful like round loaf that didn't happen. And so, I mean, I love the art of doing it, the time it takes to create it. But, otherwise I don't like cooking. I don't like, spending time to prepare sustenance for myself. But baking bread, on the other hand, is more like, it feels more like art, and I'm not really good at it, but it's okay. Like, you can just lean into these like other little day-to-day things that maybe are new for you or you're not good at, or you feel uncomfortable because then now you want to like tell everybody you baked bread, but like, no, you can't try it because it's not that good. But just like trying little things. I think a lot of it is just exploring like new, like maybe it's snowboarding, like explore something new that's maybe safer and smaller in your personal life, and just start taking baby steps, these little milestones to give something new a go.
Of course. I have absolutely enjoyed all of the time you've shared with us. And for all of the listeners, hit up Courtney. I'm sure she has so much more insight that she can share with you. And thank you again. I will leave the listeners with this, a friendly reminder to not only be kind to others, but also to your beautiful, amazing self. Thank you again, Courtney.
Thank you so much.